this video is gonna be a whole lot of fun. So, just some guy. What are you doing, kid? Really? But before I proceed with this one, some people have been asking me, am I turning into a Just Some Guy reaction channel? He would wish. No, I should probably explain some things, though, as well as how markets work. You see, my first interaction with Just Some Guy wasn't even on YouTube. I'd never seen his content before. I caught wind of him after he responded to V, who said, "The left believes in equality, meanwhile the right believes in quality." And Just Some Guy, naturally because he's got the political takes of a big bag of busted doorknobs, accused V of the fascismus. One of his brain-damaged fanboys said Just Some Guy owned him in a video. I thought there is no way in hell anyone says something that stupid is going to best the Eastern European on anything political. This is going to be a train wreck dumpster fire. And then I watched his video and thought, holy sweet mother of Moses, this is bad. This is really bad. I must ridicule this at once. And so I did. I didn't expect the video to kick off and do so well. This is one of the most watched videos on my channel now, actually. Nor did I do it to defend V. V doesn't need me to defend him against such embarrassingly weak opposition. I just wanted to join in on the kicking. And ever since then, Just Some Guy's been a salty bundle of sticks about everything. He's blocked me on the Twitter, and I'm not subbed to him on YouTube. I never see anything new he says or does. If I do, it's because some other people are messaging me about it. And if you happen to speak content creator lingo, that is code for Spoon, please do a video about Just Some Guy's latest terrible take. And considering the high traction and audience engagement I get when I do, I have every market incentive under the sun to make a response video because my audience asks me to. Besides, if I look at this from a content creator perspective, my videos featuring his takes do better than his own videos with just his takes, which is pretty gnarly considering he's got slightly less than 10 times my sub count. Whatever could that mean, I wonder? Possibly because, unlike him, I don't reek of the disingenuous as I strawman and insult everyone who disagrees with me, to the point where every time he releases a video that's even vaguely political, it increases my suspicion that he suffered some kind of head trauma, possibly at the hands of someone called Ricada. I was linked the conversation earlier on the Twitter with him and Aiden. My good lord, the guy is just an asshole. You know being a smug and condescending twat can only work if you happen to have something to be smug and condescending about, like base takes or an accent. Howling the disingenuousness with nothing more than insufferable arrogance does not win you friends, pal. Goodness sake, you're so conceited you make me look humble, which is an achievement in and of itself. Stay away from politics, kid. Every time you stray away from your niche, you stumble into a field of dormant landmines, and I have the capacity to make them live, so with that in mind, let's hear what he said.
So this is what it looks like when you watch Starship Troopers think the Terran Empire is based, and then realize they're the baddies.
I do love how he starts off his videos like this, where the opening premise of the entire video is already wrong. Primes you from the get-go to know you're about to hear something incredibly stupid.
Starship Troopers is making the rounds on Twitter because a bunch of people of no particular political persuasion.
You know, he just can't help himself. Every time he sees that rake on the ground, he just has to step on it. Over and over again.
Are butthurt that the movie is a satire about views all of them claim they don't hold.
Dude, I've seen the threads. There is no arse cramps on the right. The screeching is exclusively on the left. No one on the right is in any way taking this seriously.
Before it started trending, I first caught wind of it with a series of tweets by some author named Isaac Young. They are just magnificent. There's so much finely cut copium in his 7 tweets, I want to bottle it and sell it at the presidential election.
Considering your history when it comes to cope and politics, I would stay quiet if I were you, lad. You speaking in such a manner is the equivalent of The Rock bashing someone for knocking back steroids like a Pez dispenser.
From the first hit, it's a quality high. Quote, why the first Starship Troopers movie failed as a parody, a thread. Well, Young's first problem is that the movie isn't a parody. It's a satire. Satires don't have to be funny. Look at movies like RoboCop, Get Out, Planet of the Apes, American Psycho, and the quintessential satire, 1984.
Okay, just some guy. You just said 1984 is a satire. With that single comment, you have utterly destroyed your credibility when it comes to anything political. I would go so far as to say your only worth going forward is to be ridiculed. Mercilessly. No one would say anything that dumb out loud, not even as a joke. But considering you're super serious and you never say anything funny ever, I'm going to conclude no, you probably do think this. And considering what you just said about parody and satire, what exactly about 1984 do you think is satirical exactly? Do tell, I'm sure it would be most enlightening. And if you bother to look up the difference between parody and satire, There's some pretty good variations, but this one works well enough. A parody is a composition that imitates the style of another composition, normally for comic effect and often by applying that style to an outlandish or inappropriate subject. Whereas satire, on the other hand, is intended to do more than just entertain. It tries to improve humanity and its institutions. A satire is a literary work that tries to arouse the reader's disapproval of an object, a vice and abuse, a faulty belief, by holding it up to ridicule. Now, depending on your political persuasion, or if you're anything like me, which just some guy's not, that must suck for him, you can take a more common sense approach, which allows for a more nuanced perspective. But we'll get into that one a little bit later.
They may have funny parts in them, but they aren't always comedies. Starship Troopers leans into both the serious and humorous.
Both the serious and the humorous. Keep that one in mind for later, folks.
It's not trying to make you laugh, but it is trying to make you smile at the ridiculous nature of the characters, the situation, and the politics in the story that seem to bother Isaac Young.
The only person here who thinks he's bothered is you. I've noticed you have this disturbingly frequent habit of assuming damn near everything about someone you dislike. If only there was a word for that.
Quote, watching the movie, it was clear the director was aiming for a campy, over-the-top depiction of the Terran Federation.
True, I got that vibe myself. Very clear indeed.
Perhaps not an outright mockery, but certainly a drastic departure from the serious novel.
Again, true, no lie detected.
Director Paul Verhoeven and screenwriter Edward Neumeier are known for their over-the-top tone. Think of RoboCop, their previous film together. That movie is anything but subtle. Verhoeven is also on record saying that he viewed the novel as fascistic, militaristic, and totalitarian.
Even though he hated the book and the source material, so much so he didn't finish reading the book, stopping after only the second chapter, calling it boring and depressing, instead opting to design the movie's world as a fascist utopia in an effort to show why it's bad. I think it's safe to say Paul failed spectacularly at that one. Hence, as Young said, it is a drastic departure from the seriousness of the novel. That goes over just some guy's head, and you'll see why.
And use the film as a way to critique those ideas. I haven't read Heinlein's book. I got about 20 pages in before I lost interest.
Congrats, kid. You read even less of the book than Paul did.
So I don't know how fair that criticism is. I have seen the movie many times, and I found it to be a decent commentary on the flaws of militarism, fascism, and xenophobia.
I am far more politically aware than just some guy could ever be, and I didn't find any of those themes in the movie at all.
It's not the most thorough deconstruction of those ideas, but it does get you through the door.
Saying Starship Troopers will get you through the door finding those themes is a bit like saying you've discovered evidence of systemic racism scanning through FBI stats.
That said, if the film's take is tonally different from the novel, I can see how that would bother fans of the book. He goes on, quote, first, let's tackle a writing pitfall that irks leftists to this day. If you make your characters naturally handsome, fit, and well-groomed, then it becomes increasingly difficult to properly mock them.
True, something that is aesthetically pleasing is difficult to mock because the visual element instills a feeling of happy and comfort.
No, it doesn't. Just because someone is beautiful doesn't mean they're good.
He didn't say good, you twat. He said the naturally handsome is challenging to mock. You can mock people for any reason. At no point was that tweet discussing the morality of any character, only their appearance.
In fact, this theme appears throughout scores of stories in many cultures. There are many stories where the villain is a pretty one and uses their beauty to play on people's tendency to associate attractiveness with goodness.
No, they use their appearance to lure people in by assuming the pretty is harmless. Again, not the same thing.
Beauty and the Beast comes to mind. So when Young says, quote, beauty is self-evident and all the characters in ST are good-looking, all he's revealing is his own bias, probably based on his politics and religion given that dig at the left.
This has nothing to do with his own political persuasion. It was an observation. The dig at the left refers to something leftists don't understand, and just some guy is so dense he just proves Young's point by failing to grasp what Young was alluding to. Every time politics comes into play with him, he speaks like he's got an axe lodged in his skull. There was no revealing of any bias there at all.
I checked. He's a right-wing Catholic. Young believes that beauty is self-evident, and so falsely assumes everyone shares his views.
At no point does he say that. You're assuming, pulling it out of your ass, much like everything else you do. I guarantee you, if you told just some guy, make a video using concrete examples of the opposition's positions and not just something you pulled out of your ass, the video would be less than 90 seconds, or probably not get made at all.
That's not how reality works. Just because Young believes that all that glitters is gold doesn't mean the rest of us fall for that nonsense.
It's not nonsense. You see these two ladies? Yeah, they're objectively attractive. If you disagree, well then your eyes suck worse than your political takes.
But we should thank Young for letting us know that all it takes to get him to go along with bad ideas and terrible actions is a pretty face.
Actually, we should thank Young for triggering Just Some Guy into making this video where he, as usual, talks a bunch of complete bullshit to the point where my audience requests I make this video mocking him for. Good times.
He continues, quote, "This extends to the overall Terran Federation as well. We see clean, beautiful streets. Life seems good for Rico in his polite high school. This is a far cry from the crime-ridden and drug-addicted cities we know today. Where are the homeless encampments? The ghettos?" In context to the film, those people probably wouldn't be allowed to live very long. There's a newsreel clip promoting a live feed of a convicted murderer's execution on all channels. It's implied that he was tried, convicted, and executed on the same day. This isn't a society that tolerates the dredges. It gets rid of them. Again, this is based on the context of the film. Nothing about the society seems to allow for ne'er-do-wells. The other thing to keep in mind is that the Terran Federation is meant to be a utopia. A fascist, militaristic, right-wing utopia, but a utopia nonetheless.
I like the way you just implied that not tolerating crime and wanting good order is a right-wing trait. That does explain why all leftist-run cities are total shitholes. But in the context not of the movie, but rather what it's trying to parody and or satirize, good order is something sane people desire. Much like the good-looking people, if you show a good-looking society featuring cleanliness and lack of crime, people will tend to think the society is good based on such metrics. If anything, this video shows your worldview is seriously screwed up. Well, that and you don't understand basic human psychology at all.
So why would Young expect to see the homeless in ghettos in a utopia?
He wasn't. His point was that the movie makes the ideas look good, not bad. Again, point flying over an empty noggin.
Utopias typically don't depict the negative aspects of society. It seems like Young is again showing his hand, as he does here, quote, "Can we nail the Terran Federation for being cruel? I guess. But when you play off cruelty as a joke, you're undermining your own message. This isn't a dialogue about the brutal conditions for training soldiers in a futuristic setting. This is a gag, and it's hilarious." To Young, yes, maybe because Young doesn't realize that two things can be true at the same time. The film can make fun of those situations and use that mockery as a critique by pointing out the situation's absurdity and cruelty.
Ah, now this is where it gets a bit more interesting and where we can apply some of that nuance because Just Some Guy is so thick, he doesn't even recognize that he just showed his hand. Recall earlier where he said, it's not a parody, it's a satire. Satires don't have to be funny. Well then why can't you see that two things can be true at the same time here? You see, this is where subjectivity of what is funny throws a monkey wrench into the applicability of satire or parody. You yourself said the movie can make fun and use the mockery. Well, depending on how dark the humor of the individual is, you can find yourself sliding into parody pretty quickly if you use this metric. If you're trying to ridicule this thing in a somewhat satirical way, but the individual it's aimed at is finding more humor of the parody variety, you're going to lose the thin veneer of satirical critique. Like Young said, it's not a dialogue of brutal conditions for training soldiers, it's a gag, which of course it is. If it was serious and the foe is this legit existential threat, well then damaging your own soldier is either seen as comical or downright stupid.
This might prove a better tool in dissuading people from lionizing such a culture than playing it serious and hoping people would dislike it, especially if they'd only guess that it was cruel.
Again, unless they find it funny, in which case the point falls kinda flat.
After all, the filmmakers might encounter people who would be unmoved by a clear-cut message, such as not judging others by their appearance. Quote, "Alright, what about the critique of comparison? Perhaps the enemies of the Terran Federation have a better system. Oh wait, no, they're bugs. I've seen people genuinely argue that the bugs are supposed to be sympathetic, but they're still bugs." Yes, that's why Neumeier chose them. Apparently his wife isn't a fan of bugs. Many people, myself included, find insects repulsive, so using them as aliens easily brings out people's disgust response. If you wanted to play on people's kill-em-all tendencies, which Neumeier wanted to do, bugs are a perfect way of doing this, especially if people have political and religious beliefs that shore up their negative reaction. Quote, "This is not a face I can relate to, sympathize for, or even have a dialogue with. This screams at me to kill it with fire. Even if I didn't want to kill this thing, I want to be in orbit, far away from this creature. It's horrific, and only a contrarian can argue against it." How very Christian of you. And here I thought Catholics were taught to love all of God's creations.
Oh, so before it was bad that he's a right-wing Christian, now he's getting chastised for not being Christian enough. Clearly just some guy has not read the Bible, not exactly a lack of killing in it, mate. Secondly, I'm not going to love something that wants to kill me. If you want to be that stupid and try, be my guest, knock yourself out. Just don't expect to wake up again.
If ever you wanted to see how easily people can think other people deserve to die just because they're different,
take a scroll through the average Twitter feed of anyone with pronouns in their bio, and you will see which side is more hell-bent on massacring its political opposition. And watch the freak out when you wish to preemptively strike or get away from those who are openly telling you to cease the breathing.
remember Isaac Young's comment. That's how fast that happens.
I mean, this creature literally shoves that sharpened tentacle into a human skull and drains them until they're a lifeless husk. I would say the desire to torture it is kind of justified.
That's how easily people rationalize it. And he hasn't even brought in his religion yet. That would make it much worse, so much faster.
You are the only one who brings up religion here, kid. Repeatedly. Any sane individual, which I can tell you are not, would see self-preservation. You would have that exact same desire regardless of religious affiliation because something is trying to kill you.
Now listen, I am not a fan of bugs at all. I don't want them near me, on me, or in my house. However, that doesn't change that some of them might turn out to be intelligent. And if they are, people, other people, not me, should look into that. If it turned out to be an alien species, I would try to move past my disgust of them to find out how the hell they were able to get to our planet. My curiosity would trump my fear and disgust.
Unless by some methodology you find they're trying to kill you, in which case, no, your immediate disgust reaction, which has evolutionary utility, would kick in.
I'd also understand that they might think of us what we think of them, so it'd be to our mutual advantage to let that go so we don't kill each other.
Unless, of course, they don't wish to share and have no problem sacrificing their own to see you defeated because they don't view life the same way as you do.
The film doesn't say how humans and bugs came to fight, but it does imply that humans started the conflict.
Where does it imply that humans started the conflict exactly? Does it ever occur to you that if that was the case, the film could simply pull off the humans are just a bunch of psychotic conquerors who hate the other? Would it not have a much stronger position from which to argue that militarism is bad then?
And throughout the film, we're shown that everyone, including children, are taught to hate bugs simply because they're different.
I mean, it's a war effort, and when you see what they do to humans, I don't consider the hatred of the bugs just because they're different all that unjustified. You might have noticed I don't have a political affiliation for this kind of bollocks. My main thing here is self-preservation. A remarkably low priority for our current time period when politics for some insane reason seems to take precedence.
The entire conflict could have started simply because humans saw something they didn't like and tried to kill it. Now look at what that's caused. Both sides are trying to wipe each other out of existence. The entire plotline is a warning about why you shouldn't have the kill 'em with fire response.
That is absolutely not the point of the film. If that's what you took away from the movie, that explains why your politics is such bollocks.
Using something people find repulsive is a great way of showing how easily people can fall into that mentality.
It also shows that people can galvanize pretty quickly and forget intergroup differences when there is a bigger threat in the room. But you don't think of it that way, do you, you leftist git?
That Young considers it contrarian to disagree with his position only proves how dangerous this mentality can be, because it clearly hasn't occurred to him that the bugs probably think the same thing about humans.
Or he could have read the book and know more about the nature of the bugs than you do. I can't rule out that possibility.
That we're horrific, and they want to be as far from us as possible. And if they can't be, then they want to kill us with fire, or in their case, they're explosive shitballs. And for those who might claim that the bugs are just killing machines, I would remind them that that is exactly how humans are presented in the film. They're trained to kill without remorse. Anything that looks like a bug dies, no questions asked.
That's because they can't speak and the only thing bugs are presented as are emotionless killing machines, you fucking idiot.
We're shown the brain bug sucking out that one guy's brain, and we're meant to be horrified by that.
And you aren't? What is that thing foreplay to you, is it?
Then 15 minutes later, we're shown humans doing the same thing to the brain bug. But it's shown as propaganda that humans are finally winning. For all the violence the bugs commit, humans do the same thing.
Actually, no. In the movie, the captured bug getting experimented on is still alive. Whereas with humans, they actively just kill and harvest them. They're like the collectors from Mass Effect, essentially.
The Terran Federation is just as much the baddies as the bugs.
I'll wait till the end of the video.
They just look prettier doing it.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the only difference.
Isaac Young then wraps up with this, quote, "The only thing you can really critique about the Terran Federation is the propaganda and incompetence. But when everything is so slapstick, it fails at landing a serious point. These guys are badasses in a funny movie, not a warning about the dangers of fascism."
Based and true, 100% I endorse that perspective. In fact, I even said on the Twitter, am I the only one who watched Starship Troopers and when it's over the top, it's a tad plastic, it's not to be taken seriously, and the people who are arguing about fascism have nothing better to do, suffer from being terminally online, and should fucking touch grass? I'll stand by that sentiment, by the way.
Here's what I think. Young doesn't have a problem with the Terran Federation. In fact, Young probably believes it's based.
I mean, I do as well, but that's because I'm not a homosexual and Twitter-brained.
His problem is that by making fun of it, the filmmakers reveal that society is farcical, authoritarian, jingoistic, and idiotic, and there's no way for Young to defend it, no matter how cool and pretty he thinks all the people are, so instead he tries to claim that the film is too silly to act as a warning.
What the fuck do you smoke when you write this shit? What kind of mind-numbing substances are you on when you do these videos, kid? If the state allows you the choice to serve so you can have a say in it, that is not authoritarian, you dim-witted wanker. I mean, by that logic, on a personal level, I lived the first 5 years of my life in Europe under authoritarian rule because I wasn't a citizen. I wasn't permitted to engage with the state, but I potentially could if I stayed here for at least 5 years. How is this any different?
That's a weak counterpoint easily revealed by flipping the script. You use humor and satire to point out the flaws and absurdities of, let's say, communism, and I doubt Isaac Young would claim that the black comedy and satire, The Death of Stalin, is too silly to be a substantive critique of the insanity of Stalin's Russia, even though the movie is hilarious. I don't think the problem for Young is the humor. I think his problem is that Starship Troopers critiques views he values, and that bothers him.
Total projection. Evidently, he has no idea what the hell Young is trying to say, because he's a possessed ideologue. Not to mention, how can you say, I don't think the problem for Young isn't the humor, is that the movie critiques views he values, yet the title of this entire fucking video is called When You Don't Understand Satire. So in your mind, he doesn't understand the satire, but he can't understand what is being satirized enough to get pissed off at his values apparently being satirized. Do you write this dumb shit before it leaves your face? This is ridiculous.
So in his eyes, that makes the movie a failure.
Okay, so now it's not that he can't understand what's being satirized, but he knows that it's too much satire and therefore too silly for the message to be effective. What the hell?
But if anything, the film over-succeeded in making this point. When it was released, it faced criticism claiming it endorsed fascism, militarism, and Nazism.
As claimed by who? A bunch of morons in the press? Or just a bunch of idiots who looked at the uniforms and went, hey look, they're black?
Some people took the humor as a way of softening the hard edge of those ideas instead of pointing out their flaws. Like Isaac Young, people saw something and then reacted to it instead of taking the time to analyze the film and its themes and its message.
Yeah, I did all of those and I arrived at a drastically different point than you did, kid.
They saw what they wanted to see and then trashed the film.
I'm not going to trash the film, just your bad politics and piss-poor opinions.
And many of them didn't have the decency to admit later on that they got it wrong.
Got it wrong! Save it for the end.
There's nothing in the movie leading people to support fascism or totalitarianism.
Which is nowhere in this movie.
That said, if people are already leaning in that direction, they might miss the point and think the movie is based.
I mean, I'm further right than this movie and I thought it was pretty base, nor did I approach this with a politically twitching brain because unlike you, I can actually unplug and view things apolitically. You should try it sometime, maybe for once you can have a take that doesn't suck ass.
This is why I think people should pay attention to these two different reactions, because this is what happens to many stories that critique the horrors of humanity. It doesn't take much for people to take the criticism the wrong way, or be offended, or miss the point entirely. And Isaac Young has the rare distinction of doing all three. It truly gives a new meaning to the word special. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.
Oh, dear Lord in heaven, that was a struggle session and a half. Let's get that last one out of the way, the got it wrong line. If you go out of your way to make propaganda, of any kind, the success of that effort depends on your message resonating with the audience. You can make something littered with anti-fascist messaging in your head, but if the audience isn't receptive of them at all, then you failed the mission of your propaganda. That is not the fault of the audience, the consumers, that's the fault of you, the creator. Oh, and speaking of that, here's a question I've seen no one ask except me because I'm a genius. Can you really make a movie critiquing fascism when it's painfully obvious you have no fucking idea what fascism even is? There's a reason why only leftists watch this movie and see fascism, because to those politically ignorant imbeciles, anything that isn't democracy is fascistic. Which doesn't make any sense. You can still vote, you just have to earn it. Where is the fascism exactly here? I'll give you all my take of the movie, because unlike just some guy, I can do so without being politically possessed. It's a unique ability that I was born with, being European and sane. And yes, warning, there will be spoilers. At the start of the movie, some of the main characters are in a classroom, and the teacher talks about the failures of democracy. Social scientists brought the world to the brink of chaos. Sorry, I was daydreaming about something. Something given has no value, the teacher says. By the way, I guarantee you, those words scar just some guy's psyche. Every time he hears that, he has to fight the urge to crawl into the fetal position. By the way, this is the only time in the movie it touches on any political themes in any way. The first couple of minutes, and that's it. But anyway, the main character, Johnny Rico, enlists with the Federation for his girlfriend, Carmen. Only she goes off to become a pilot, and he goes off to infantry. While he's at training, she ends things with him, and later he ends up being responsible for someone getting killed during a combat simulation with live fire, and he decides to quit and return home. Only before he leaves, he learns the bugs, the main antagonists of the film, launched a meteorite that hit Buenos Aires, where he lived, potentially killing his family. How am I supposed to look at this character, what he's gone through, and not feel for the guy? The only footage we have of the bugs up until this point is them brutally massacring humans, and they just launched a meteorite that killed millions of people. What kind of screwed up hippie bastards watch this movie and go, yeah, we should really listen to the bugs? If you want to make your antagonist relatable or sympathetic in some way, it would help if you make them something beyond merely human killing machines. Oh no, you don't understand. It's actually a very enlightening critique of fascism. No, it isn't, and you can fuck off. The leftist take on this movie is such a cliched caricature of their perspectives. It's rather depressing it isn't satire. Let's take a look at our hilariously demeaned pal over here, Just Some Guy. He is such a quintessentially commie boy at this point. It's so very predictable. It's so hard to look at him like he's a real person. It's quite remarkable, really. Though I will say this. Do you know what's the slimiest move he tried to pull over your eyes during this whole video? Him saying he would turn off his disgust response if he found out the creatures are intelligent. Yeah, right. I've seen how much of an asshole he is to anyone who disagrees with him politically, who are significantly smarter than he is. So I will bet my bollocks, if those bugs ended up being Catholic, that lying son of a bitch would try and lop his Duke Nukem at the drop of a fucking dime. So spare me this BS of, oh, the intelligence of the bugs really matter, as if that intelligence will only be used for peaceful means and not to make them more effective at killing you. Maybe they aren't libertarian. Maybe they aren't interested in dialogue. Maybe, just maybe, they just want your resources and killing you is far more efficient. Does that ever occur to you? No, of course not, because your insanely jarred noggin is trying to humanize things that want to kill you. Man, doesn't that sound very familiar these days? Lord, the left has such a terminal case of presentism. But I'm going to try and explain why the left relate to the bugs, aside from the fact that they're communists. The line used in the movie to describe them is, it reproduces in vast numbers, has no fear or ego, doesn't know about death, and so is the perfect selfless member of society. Man, that sounds a bit like the Urukai, doesn't it? But the reason I bring this up, I want to ask this question. If you take any society, a group of humans, even tribal ones, I would say the three things they need are stability, order, and defense. There's a bit of overlap with the first two. Now you can have a stability even if the order is a bit wonky, or the appearance of order, but the stability is really shady if one or two people get ousted from power. But once you have these things, food and water, what have you, beyond survivability, question becomes, what do you live for? I don't think the left knows the answer to this question, because as far as our timeline is concerned, the left do two things and two things only, bitch and consume, and that's all. Think about it, what else do they live for? This is why they relate to the bugs, because they're more like the bugs than the humans in the story. Actually, in some ways, I would say they're even worse, because at least the bugs were sacrificed for the good of the hive. None of the leftists would ever do that. I swear, the way they operate is simply as follows. If the power structure impedes, prohibits, or restricts them in any capacity from turning their bodies into chemical drug labs, from getting as high as they want, from getting as drunk as they want, rivaling the weight of a walrus, culling the reproductive cycle, or, of course, engaging in democracy, they operate as if they're oppressed. They live for nothing more than the worst sort of high-time preference vices, and that is all. There is nothing more to life for a leftist than that. In reality, a leftist is nothing more than a trust fund baby on steroids. Which brings us to what they lack: religion. And you all know this, in the absence of religion, they worship the state. And the state in this scenario is not their state. Oh, no. This state is perverted. It doesn't have any universal suffrage, no women's rights, or any of that stupid progressive bullshit. It is militaristic and orderly. It is not a state apparatus that worships equality. Rather, it is one that has concepts like duty and honor, a willingness to earn your way and not just have it all handed to you simply because your ass exists. In other words, it is one giant middle finger to the liberals of our present day. And that is why they hate the movie. Any hierarchical order that violates that entitled trust fund baby mentality causes them to echo painful cries of fascism. Here is powered by Silver Spoon. They all have lodged up their asses. Cheers for watching, and once again, I apologize for nothing.